Hello and well met. This is Leon with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today we're going to do some more content creation, kind of like a part 2 from yesterday. If you guys were watching, I was building some assets and some content in Fantasy Grounds. I was using tools like Chat GPT. I used Midjourney. I made a character in the last video, and I started building an artifact, which is kind of like the centerpiece of a one-shot adventure that I'm kind of putting together with the help with the Chat GPT and Fantasy Grounds. So I spent some time kind of working with this a little yesterday. I wanted to kind of backtrack a little bit. So as far as the content itself, Chat GPT helped me come up with some of these special abilities and some of the things that this artifact is known for. So it really came up with a really cool backstory. It actually has some kind of lore to it, and it kind of is the centerpiece of the adventure. So I like the quests that kind of center around that kind of stuff because it gives the adventure more focus, and it also gives that opportunity for role play and backstory. And it really does kind of feel like there's more immersion when you just don't have like a +1 sword that you're going after. You know, you have a +1 sword, but it might be an orc axe or a blade or something, and it's been blessed by the god, and it was created for such and such war, and those sort of things are helpful. So I've also worked with the Atlassian wiki guide. So if you guys are new to Fantasy Grounds or you're just starting to kind of figure it out, make sure that you use the Atlassian because it really helps with a lot of stuff. Like there are so many times that people would ask for questions that can be really answered here. However, not everyone learns the same way. So not everyone wants to go to a book to figure something out, but this is what I'm using to help me determine what I need to build in regards to the effects or the automation that's potentially able to do in Fantasy Grounds. So not only do I have an item, it has the value, the description, a story, it has some lore attached to it. It even has the major and minor benefits for using the item. And it also even has a backstory, like how you can destroy it. So it's pretty interesting story overall. So I have to go in and update the content from the item to the page because I have a whole page that's dedicated to describing it, and I'm going to make this like a appendice item that's going to be linked to an appendix so people can pull this up and read it easier. But I also made the item, so the item can go in your inventory. And then there are some things that I'm going to link to the item itself so that when you're using the item, it's more convenient to actually be able to apply those effects or the automation if there's any to be had. Now, not everything can be automated, but I certainly did my best to make that information a lot more available and easier to get to. So I'm going to link the powers that I created, and I'll get into how those were made shortly. But what I want to do is I'm going to link the powers to the page first. So I'm just going to call this automation or Fantasy Grounds automation. That way, if anyone needed to tap into this, it's right there. It's kind of, it's kind of convenient. It's not like buried underneath a bunch of stuff. And I think that's one point of frustration that people get when you're not quite sure where things are in Fantasy Grounds. There's a lot of digging around and opening windows and all kinds of stuff. So it's nice when you have the stuff conveniently linked. So what I'm going to say is Fantasy Grounds automation for I think this is the drowned moon, the sunken moon. Got to get that right. Okay, so this is a series of links that I've created that go with the item, and this makes it handy. So if you have a player that's going to use the content, you don't have to do all this stuff on the fly. You can actually you can have it set for like when you're ready to use it, and it's easy. You just drag it to the character sheet, and you don't have to mess with trying to figure it out during the middle of a game. So that's why I did this, because I wanted it to be really simple to use, or at least to be able to find it. I mean, that's one of the things that can be annoying during a game, is can't find something. So I linked these spell effects over to the item. And now that I have all that done, what I'm going to do is Control A for the item itself and delete it. And then I'm going to do for the story, I'm going to hit Control A and Control C for copy, and then Control V for paste. And that'll put in all my work from the page so it matches. So this is the actual item, and then this is the actual page. So I'm going to link the item here too. So just for the sake of organization, I'm going to put this here. That way it's all set, all ready to go, one place. You don't have to hunt around for everything. And that's a good thing when you're running a campaign. So that's one benefit of making your own content, is you can organize it the way you want. Some content out there doesn't translate well into virtual tabletop, or vice versa. There might be tabletop stuff that's needed but can't be done in Fantasy Grounds, or vice versa. So there's those challenges. And then it's kind of up to the person adapting the items or converting it. Like, if they're not sure how to make all this automation stuff, they're only going to give you the information. They may or may not provide the automation. This is some advanced or more intermediate stuff that people may or may not use. So if that's the case, they're not going to add it or include it, because it's more of a Fantasy Grounds thing than the actual module itself. So this isn't provided in the PDF. The only thing that's provided is the description of the abilities. How that is adapted to Fantasy Grounds is up to the end user or the person who does the conversion. So when you're making your own content in Fantasy Grounds, you have more flexibility and you know what your needs are, so you're able to convert the content the way you want it. So this is a major artifact. This is not just a +1 sword. So I went the extra mile and made the actual description. We got the story here. So I want to go back over through some of this, even though I've kind of went through this yesterday. Just in case you're tuning in, you haven't watched the first part. So this is a wondrous magic item that has resurfaced. I mean, this thing has been gone for quite some time, but now there are factions in Baldur's Gate. They're vying for this. They want it. Everyone wants it for their own reasons. It's a very powerful item. So it's a wondrous item. It's an artifact, and it does require attunement to benefit from its power. So in the properties of the item itself, under the rarity, in parentheses, you need to put requires attunement if you're going to make a magic item. So that's important, because when you go to equip it in your inventory, such as we'll do it for this character here, this is a good way to test it too. So what I'm going to do is drag this over into the character sheet, and it has a little spot here, requires attunement. So until you click on that as a player, you're not going to benefit from some of the things that come with it. So that's kind of a D&D thing, but it's part of the rule set. So if you have magic items that require attunement, you need to put that in the rarity area. And you could take another item that already exists and kind of see how it's set up, and then use that as your template. So then I put the description in here. I put the non-ID name. So what happens is, if it's not identified, they're only going to see this silver crescent-shaped buckler shield. They're not going to see the whole description. The other thing is adding that backstory in there really kind of lent itself to the story itself, because it gives a purpose for the item. So this one requires attunement. It's a really revered item. It was supposedly part of Saloon's Tears, which is a meteorite type thing that landed on in the Forgotten Realms. It's like a luminescent. This item itself is a luminescent crescent-shaped artifact wrought from a celestial silvery metal. So that was taken from one of Saloon's Tears, or at least that's the rumor. Its proportions mirror that of a small buckler. Its weight is ethereally light, so it's not that heavy. Matter of fact, I give it like 2-pound weight. It's not too heavy. And its touch is akin to the gentle caress of a cool summer's breeze. The artifact beats in harmony with the lunar cycle, radiating an otherworldly glow that encapsulates the mystic beauty of the moon in the velvet canvas of the night sky, mirroring the elegance of a silver sickle slicing through a sea of stars. So that's kind of what the feel and the look, the vibe is. But there's some lore attached to it. So supposedly, in times lost to the annals of history, Selûne, the goddess of the moon, shed a single tear, a droplet of divine sorrow for those that were lost and forlorn, and those who shivered in the fear under darkness of night, and those who sought solace and guidance in the celestial lantern of the moon. This tear, infused with divine magic and the maternal compassion of the goddess, descended onto the land of Faerûn, manifesting into the form of a gleaming crescent upon touching the mortal soil. Thus the sunken moon was born. So it's a little bit more to it than that. That's kind of the poetic description of it. But I'm going to bring up my pointer so you guys can see what I'm pointing at, because that can be annoying sometimes. When you get a presenter that's trying to show you something, and with the way that the computer screens are and stuff, it's kind of hard to see. But this is reading up here in this lore section. And what's really neat is that the Chat GPT app, the website thing, helped me. So this actually helped me write all that, which is really nice because it gave me the, kind of the premise for it, and then I kind of expanded on it. So basically, a highly skilled elven artisan, really gifted in the craft of celestial forgings, used the goddess's tear ground into a fine powder as the material to forge this divine relic. The meticulous process occurred during the time of dragons, which is a long time ago in realm speak, imprinting the artifact with the raw ancient magic of an era steeped in mysticism and celestial wonder. This was the time when the dragons and the giants were fighting back and forth. The sunken moon stands as a testament to the divine benevolence of Selûne and the unmatched prowess of an elven artisanship. So that's really cool. Despite the chaos and turbulence of history, the sunken moon remained untouched by the nefarious Netherese. So if you know your realm history, the Netherese are not good. The artifact evaded the relentless scourge of these power-hungry mages, who sought to drain the world of its most precious relics to feed their insatiable thirst for arcane supremacy. So they back in the day, they were looking for magic items to kind of fuel their own, and they would destroy them and take the components and the power out of them. So the previous possessor, the last known guardian of this relic, was a venerated cleric of Selûne named Seraphine Moonmantle. During the times of troubles, which was years later, she wielded the sunken moon as a beacon of hope, repelling the creeping shadows with its holy light and offering solace to those those swallowed by despair. The artifact was lost after Seraphine's death, its location obscured by time and mystery until its rediscovery. So now it gets into the properties. So the sunken moon has the following properties. So it has something called Moon's Comfort, which I kind of turned into a note. It's not really a spell, but it when it goes on the combat tracker and on your character, it kind of like a reminder, essentially. So then the Moon's Guidance, as a vessel for, let's see, so Moon's Comfort, its breathtaking beauty and divine aura of the sunken moon stirs a deep sense of calm and relief within those who gaze upon it. This soothing energy can pacify agitated spirits, facilitate peaceful dialogue, and even transform a potentially hostile encounter into a peaceful congregation. The benefits vary depending on the situation deemed by the Game Master. So it's kind of more of a roleplay thing, but you can allow this to kind of either give you advantage or maybe you just make things that work for that situation. So it's kind of a loosely interpreted benefit. The Moon's Guidance. So as a vessel for Selûne's wisdom, the sunken moon offers celestial insights into lunar-related tasks, skills, or challenges. Once per day, you can gain advantage on any check that aligns with these contexts. The benefits do not extend to rolls made in combat. So this thing will give you advantage on one roll that's related to, like moon type stuff, lunar, maybe even stellar stuff, but it's mostly as more of a role play tool, but it gives you advantage on, tracking the moon, doing readings that involve the moon, rituals, that kind of thing. Silvered. So if used to bash like a shield, some monsters that have immunity or resistance to non-magical weapons are susceptible to silver weapons. So like lycanthropes. And it can also be used as a reaction in combat under the proper circumstances. So if you're using it and you get an attack on you and you have a bonus action left or a reaction, you can take that and basically apply it as a, like a bonus to your, as a, basically a reaction. You can use it to bash. So, you can come in with your mace and then come around and bash with it. So it kind of gives you that option, which I think is a cool touch. It kind of makes it more powerful. So the major beneficial properties are the Moon's Embrace. So while you're attuned to it, you're credited or cradled in Saloon's protective magic, which manifests as a +2 bonus to AC and saving throws. So that's a really big bonus right there. So I have the effect for that. So if the player is if they actually have this on their person, I can apply those effects, and it has to be done manually. It doesn't do it automatically unless you have some sort of extension. But in this case, that's one of the benefits, is that you'll get +2 on your AC, like a shield, and then you get +2 on saving throws. So that's a big deal. Moon's Authority. So the Sunken Moon holds the power to repel creatures of the night. So this is vampires and all kinds of stuff, like lycanthropes and undead. So as an action, you can present the artifact and make it emit a brilliant silver light. Each undead or lycanthrope that can see the light within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom saving throw. If the creature fails its saving throw, it is turned for 1 minute or until it takes damage. So you can kind of use it to get people off your back. Like you got a bunch of werewolves attacking, that'd be a good point for that. So that's not as useful, but it is nice to have that. You can use it once per day. That's not in here, but that's essentially the use case. So the major detrimental properties. So the person who wields it, Saloon's tear yearns for its celestial body or a celestial abode, so it wants to return back to the sky. Whenever the attuned user is outdoors at night under the open sky, they must make a save versus wisdom saving throw or become charmed by the moon. While charmed in this way, the user is compelled to bask in the moonlight, losing interest in their current activity until the charm ends. The charm ends if the user takes any damage or someone else uses an action to shake them out of this stupor. So it's kind of like it puts you in a trance or like a daze, if it can kind of overwhelm you. So it can be destroyed. So what I thought about for tying this into the story is that one of the things you're going to do in this, potentially to set the spirit that's trapped in there free, is to destroy it. And that comes up during the role-playing and the game. So the Sunken Moon can be unmade in a ritual that requires the combined divine intervention of Saloon and another deity of the night, such as Shar. The ritual ends the artifact's unique powers, returning what was borrowed from the celestial realm. This process does not destroy the artifact. Instead, it reverts the Sunken Moon to a pure silver crescent devoid of divine properties. This pure silver can be sold for about 100 gold or crafted into 6 silvered arrows. So it does leave behind some value. Once the ritual is complete, the artifact's celestial magic is released, causing a temporary luminous display of moonlight that mirrors the brilliant hues of an aurora borealis. This spectacle can be seen up to a mile away and is often mistaken as a divine sign or omen. After the light show ends, the sunken moon's luminescence is extinguished forever, the artifact now a silent testament to its glorious past. So it has a kind of a rich history, and we even talk about how if you destroy it, what happens to it. And then I have all of the automation set up for it. So what I did is on the Actions tab of my character sheet, this is probably the easiest way to do it, is to create a area for the sunken moon. So I have the Soothing Light, the Silver Bash attack, Moon's Embrace, Moon's Authority, and the Lunar Guidance. So these are all effects that can be placed on the character when you use the item. So on the inventory, it does require attunement. So the item itself, when it's on your sheet, it's not going to require attunement because it doesn't have the identification property on it. So if I go to the item itself, I'm going to equip it, and then I'm going to go to the item, and I'll say we get it identified. Someone figures out what it is. Now you have to attune it to benefit from its abilities. I mean, that's kind of a way to just keep track of it. It doesn't necessarily block anything unless it has like a weapon or something that will block that. But in this case, it won't do much. But then once you have that, you can click on this item here, and then you have all this information. It tells you about the stuff that we just read about. It goes into a lot of detail, but then also there's the automation down here at the bottom that I linked conveniently to the story entry and to the item. And when you go to the Actions tab, there's a section here that you can use if you're going to use the item. So this Lunar Guidance is basically it's a advantage to all skill checks. Or it's supposed to say it says advanced check, so that's a skill check all. So advantage on skill checks. So that's what this does. And if I go into the properties of this, all I did was type in Lunar Guidance with the semicolon, and then I used the syntax from the wiki guide on the website, on the Atlassian. So if you look at this, it tells you, how to write these things and what they do. It doesn't cover every use case. There's so many variations on this, but it gives you an idea of how to do it. And if you look at the examples and you start recognizing some of the syntax here, it's not that bad. There's only attack, saves, if types, damage, healing. I mean, that's the main categories, right? And then all the rest of the stuff is kind of, use cases like when do you need it and why do you need it and when do you apply it and those sort of things. So this stuff takes time to kind of wrap your mind around it, but once you do, you know where to look to find the information. And as far as how you write it on the character sheet, that just takes a little practice. So I didn't know exactly what I needed until I started thinking about the magic item itself. So then I made this Lunar Guidance, which gives you advantage on all checks. So that's anything supposed to be related to lunar stuff. So nothing stops a player from activating this, but it does provide the opportunity to put it on the combat tracker. So when you do make a skill check related to it, it automatically handles it. So that's all this does. And it expires after a round on the next roll. So when you roll, it expires essentially. So that's that ability. Moon's Authority is one of the abilities. So this really doesn't do much in regards to... I got to make the chat entry here because it's very specific to this specific area here. So if I wanted to do this so that the person using this doesn't get confused, I can copy this little passage here for this spell, or this automation, and that will give them an idea of what it does. That way, they're not digging around looking for it, and it's part of the properties of the spell itself, and not just a note. So if I go back to this Moon's Authority, it's blank right now. There's no information. So if I copy and paste in here and then kind of format it a little bit, so I'll go ahead and hit enter. And then link, just close it. So now when you bring this item up, if you want to know what this does, it's right there. So these are things, the little touches that you're going to put on these as you're building it. So once you have all this stuff built, you can drag it over to the spells area. So I have a group called Moon Campaign, and all the automation that I've made for this, I went ahead and did this, made it so that it actually shows up there. So this Moon Embrace, I still have to do that one. So this one is a little bit more to it. So this one is what gives you the AC and the saving throw bonus. So I put Moon's Embrace with the semicolon after. That's what tells Fantasy Grounds to ignore, or to look to the right, not to the left. So AC2 is going to add +2 to the armor class, and then save :2 is going to add to the saving throw when you make those. So this is a good usage of this, and then it's set to self because this only works for the person that's wielding it. And you can apply this effect in the chat. So if I were to activate that ability, or if I'm wielding it, this kind of like this little buckler shield thing, I can go ahead and apply this effect to my character. So if I click on it, it automatically applies that here, and it does it mathematically. So it doesn't change the character sheet. It just applies this effect to this character. So this is on at all times if you have the item with you. So there's no expiration on there. But one of the things I wanted to put on here, one of the final steps, is putting the actual description for that ability here. So if you go down to what's this Moon's Embrace, I want to copy and paste this so it has a description. So if somebody wants to use the item and it's on their Actions tab, they can read what it does. So that makes it more convenient for you and the player. So that's just kind of part of making this. And when you're done with it, when you're all done, you've tested it, you know it works and everything, then you drag it over to your spells area. And what that does is it stores this effect or this work that you did into Fantasy Grounds, and then later on, after you build like several hundred of them or whatever you do, you can export them as a module and use them in other games. So you don't have to keep recreating the same stuff over and over. So if you create any automation, create it on the character sheet, and then drag it over to spells or powers or whatever rule set that supports this. And that'll give you a way to save it. So you're not saving it on the character sheet, you're also saving it to the Fantasy Grounds records. You can take one of these and drag it to another character sheet. So when all this first came out, there used to be a master character sheet that had all these different abilities. And then you would just load that character up and just drag the stuff you needed to your character that you were building. But since then, a few years after that, then Rob and his team came up with a way to store it as a spell, and then they organize it by class, race, or whatever the effect is, and then they use that as a module. So this is stuff that you'd be buying on the DM's Guild or wherever you could source these type of things. So in this case, it's on the DM's Guild. So this allows for people to store their items in this, so you can make your own, or if you don't want to do all of the standard stuff or the actual Wizards of the Coast stuff, and Rob's already done all that. And also Silent Ruin and Grim Press have already done their own too. So they came back a couple years after Rob did his, and they kind of did their own version. Kind of works a little differently, but it does the same thing. You can apply the effects. But in this case, this is a custom thing, and this is where it actually comes in handy to know your resources. So you use this wiki guide, and then you can also come back and you can take this information and store it on your character sheets, and then you can look at others that have already been done and use those as templates. So if you're unsure how you're supposed to do it, or an example, you can crack these open. What I mean by cracking it open is if you have an effect on your sheet that's like this already, and if you click on the magnifying glass, you can see how it's written. And once you understand the verbiage, it's not really coding at all, it's just keywords. And once you understand this verbiage and how it works, it's much easier to deal with. and it starts to click, and eventually you'll be able to write your own. You won't have to rely on anybody else's stuff. Because if you use third-party content like Kobold Press or, you know, Frog God Games or one of the third-party publishers, a lot of those have their own unique spells and their own unique features and monsters and stuff. So you kind of have to do a lot of this yourself. And also, if you do homebrew, or you know you're doing content for your own games and such, you got to kind of eventually learn this stuff if you want to take advantage of some of the automation. Just keep in mind that not everything could be automated, and some stuff just isn't worth it. I mean, if all it does is, you know, one little thing and you only use it like once in a blue moon, it's probably not worth setting up all the automation for it. But your needs and what your players' needs are and the scope of the campaign and all those sort of things kind of determines that. But in this case, this will expire on the next roll. So after you do the check, this will expire. So that's a good thing. So it doesn't stay on the whole time. Whereas this Moon's Embrace or whatever, this thing, or Moon's Authority, actually Moon's Embrace, that will stay with you the whole time. Moon's Authority is a saving throw and a turned effect. So when you roll this, you drag and drop it onto the skeletons. You're effectively rolling a saving throw for them, and then it will apply. Or if they fail, then you apply the turned effect. So that's just some of the things that you'll learn as you develop a sense of the rule set, how it applies to Fantasy Grounds, and how Fantasy Grounds applies to the rule set. So where those two come together is the important part of learning how to be more efficient, how to take advantage of the automation, and then just overall being comfortable with the platform. So those things take time. You're not going to learn all this stuff in one day. You want to take it in little bites and do it, you know, but basically I'm just kind of giving you a little advice. But this is so that if you need to use the magic item and there's any possible way that you can automate it, you can do it yourself. And it really just takes a little time and familiarity. And even if you make these, you still have to test them and see if they work. You might write it this way, but maybe it's not quite right, you know. So there's things that you have to learn about the mechanics and how Fantasy Grounds works too. So you might write it the way you think it should be, but maybe you got it, maybe it's not capitalized when it should be. Or maybe you got an extra letter or character in there. So all that stuff matters. Case sensitive, spaces, colons, commas, all that stuff matters. So in this case, this Moon's Embrace, if I put a comma here, it probably wouldn't work. It has to be a semicolon after this first power. So there's that. There's little things like that you'll notice. So it's just a matter of getting used to what it is that you're trying to set up and getting used to this rule set and to Fantasy Grounds. So, and then also all the verbiage that comes along with the advanced automation. So a lot of this isn't provided out of the box. You have to go and pursue this yourself or buy it or perhaps even don't worry about it. I mean, it's not critical to play. It just kind of helps speed things up a little bit. So that's basically what I've done with this magic item is I put it on this character here and she has it equipped, and now I'm kind of looking at all the powers and stuff and kind of updating the descriptions because there's no description on these, so it kind of sucks for the end user when they're trying to use something like this. It's not on here. So let me go to Soothing Moonlight, or it's called Moon's Comfort over here. So I want to change that. Let's see. Is that right? Soothing Moonlight? What is that? Soothing Moonlight. 60 feet. Oh yeah, that's this Moon's Comfort. So I need to change that because that can be confusing. So I want to put, probably put Moon's Comfort, I guess. I kind of like Soothing Moonlight better, so maybe I'll change this instead. It's important that these things match because it can get really confusing. So I wanted to put that in there so they know it's 60-foot range. And then I'm going to put the soothing moonlight. Okay, so I will do that. So anyways, that's all I got for today. I'm just kind of working on this adventure and building the content. So hopefully this is kind of helpful to you, and I'll continue the series if you guys are interested. Leave me some feedback, whether you hate it or not, and I'll try to see if I can do some more of this. Okay, so